Welcome to the Eternal Life Plan. And for the new viewers, I am Christine Harrington. And in 1992, yes, I had a near-death experience and met God. I sure did. That video is on my YouTube channel if you ever want to check it out. But today's topic, is about this meeting Pope Leo had today with the FSSP. And that's today's topic. We have Dan Kavik that is handling the comments and moderating tonight. And I appreciate Dan volunteering to do this. So let's get into the show. So this morning, Pope Leo received a private audience from Father John Berg, the Superior General of the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, FSSP, a society of priests whose very mission is built around the traditional Latin Mass. And the sacraments are celebrated before the reforms of Vatican II. So the Holy See itself confirmed the meeting in today's official Vatican audience schedule. Father John Berg requested the meeting with Pope Leo, and Pope Leo accepted it. So let's get to the article, and I'll show you where it was first announced. It was on the Italian publication Info Vaticana. Leo XIV meets with the Superior General of the FSSP, John Berg. And it said that Pope Leo received Father John Berg, Superior General of the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, this Monday. The information published in the Holy See Bulletin indicates that the meeting took place today amid the daily audiences, but up to now, no official details have emerged about the content of the meeting. In February 2024, Pope Francis met with FSSP officials and reaffirmed their charism of offering the Mass in Latin, as well as the start of an apostolic visitation to the fraternity in September 2024, the first since 2014. For its part, the FSSP announced in 2024 the election of Father John Berg as Superior General for a 6-year term following the decision of the General Chapter. All right, now, what does this mean? The traditional Mass. What does this signal for the traditional Mass? So let's first go to who are the FSSP. That is a mouthful. FSSP. To understand why this matters, let's take a trip back in time. All right, here's a history lesson. The priestly fraternity of St. Peter was founded on July 18th, 1988, with the approval of Pope St. John Paul II. It began as a group of priests and seminarians who wanted to remain in full communion with the Church while offering the traditional Latin Mass according to the 1962 Roman Missal, the extraordinary form cherished by countless Catholics worldwide. The fraternity isn't a religious order with vows like monks or friars. Instead, it's a society of apostolic life of pontifical rite, which means its priests live in community, but devote themselves primarily to pastoral work, especially the liturgy and sacraments, as they were before the liturgical changes of the 20th century. Early on, bishops loyal to the Pope welcomed them, as did the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who helped facilitate their place in the Church. So let's talk about their growth and presence today. So their worldwide presence serves the FSSP today serves in approximately 150 dioceses worldwide across 5 continents. Still a small number of FSSPs. They maintain about 251 Mass centers, plus 48 personal parishes where the extraordinary form is regularly celebrated. The fraternity counts 387 priests worldwide, 30 deacons, and 162 seminarians actively preparing for priesthood, with around 575 members in total worldwide. Now, their United States presence is this. The FSSP operates in 39 dioceses, still a small number, serving through 54 apostolates with only 112 priests on the ground. The apostolates include parish communities, chapels, Mass centers, and pastoral ministries that offer not only Sunday Mass, but sacraments, catechesis, retreats, and spiritual formation. So how did this all come about? Well, in the 1980s, a major turning point occurred in traditional Catholic circles. The unauthorized consecration of bishops by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. Wow, I always have trouble with his name. Archbishop Lefebvre. I think I got it right. And the resulting canonical tensions that followed. A segment of priests wanted to remain fully Catholic and fully traditional. Thus, under John Paul II's guidance, Pope John Paul II's guidance, and with the encouragement of then Cardinal Ratzinger, the FSSP was born. Unlike some other traditional groups that found themselves in irregular status, the FSSP has maintained complete canonical communion with the Holy See ever since. That makes meetings like today's audience especially significant. It's both a pastoral affirmation and a symbol of unity and liturgical diversity, which Pope Leo has talked about so many times. So this wasn't just a photo op. And in a time when discussions about liturgy, tradition, and ecclesial unity are front and center in Catholic life, a private audience between the Pope and the leader of a traditional society of priests really says something. It says that the church cares about unity without uniformity, and that the ancient liturgy has a place, not in some sideline history exhibition, but in the living, beating heart of the church today. Now, we have Dan Kavik, who knows something a little bit more about this, and he is going to come on with us right now. Dan, are you ready to come on?
Yeah, I'm ready. Here I am.
All righty.
And thank you for having me again, Christine. It's always great to be back with you and your audience. You have a great audience.
Well, we are lucky to have you as a volunteer for Eternal Life Plan, Dan. I really appreciate your service to our small community, and I know the community appreciates you too. So, what can you add about the FSSP?
Yeah, so the FSSP, they actually did things right. And Lefebvre, he was given a fair deal by Rome. Anybody knows the history or has been a former member of the SSPX knows this whole tale or story, if you want to call it that. We all know the history. So with the FSSP, they made the right decision because they understood that Archbishop Lefebvre was going too far whenever he did those consecrations. He was going against canon law. Pope John Paul II tried to give him a fair chance and warned him, saying like, hey, if you do this, you're going to be excommunicated. So Lefebvre knew very well that he was going to be excommunicated, and he still went ahead and did those consecrations anyway. So one other thing I want to mention real quick with the FSSP is there was a lot of concern. I remember back after Traditionis Custodes came around with Pope Francis. And Pope Francis actually had a decree just for the FSSP that he had issued back in February 11th of 2022. And what he was basically saying was, okay, you know what, the FSSP, they have, they still have faculties to celebrate the Latin Mass. They can carry out the sacraments, follow the 62 Missal. So I have a feeling that Pope Leo is going to continue that. As I don't see why he would want to remove or change any of that, but we'll see what happens with this meeting that just occurred. But going back to the SSPX real quick, so you had what I think it was like 12 priests, if I remember right. Yeah, it was on July 18th of 1988. You had 12 priests and then 20 seminarians who formed, the society together, and then they got Rome's approval, and they accepted the Novus Ordo Mass, which the SSPX still doesn't consider to be a valid rite. Basically, they say that there's issues with it, even though the consecration could be said validly. So I'm not going to go on a rant here, but anybody who's been a part of the SSPX knows about all this, and I have a feeling that Pope Leo is going to stick with what Pope Francis already decreed, but we'll see.
Dan, let me ask you this question. We have an FSSP chapel here in Indianapolis. It's down in Greenwood in my area. So a Roman Catholic can go to an FSSP Mass and still be within the church, right?
Correct. They're sui juris, as they say in Latin. So they're in union with Rome canonically, and as long as any Catholic Church, even Eastern rites, are sui juris, I think I'm saying that right. you can go to go to them for the sacraments. You can fulfill your Sunday obligation at any of those churches out there.
And you can go to confession to their priest.
Correct.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be any different than going to the Novus Ordo parishes and their priests.
No different. We have the Institute of Christ the King, which is I say is like the sister group to the FSSP. They're another group that celebrates the 62 Missal. Same kind of situation. Similar in terms of like them being traditional minded, but they're a little bit different. There's some differences between the FSSP and the ICK. The ICK, they have a more monastic kind of approach to things, and they actually call their priest canon instead of father. It's more of like a European thing. But yeah, so I've gone to the ICK for mass. I've gone there for confessions. No issues. Rome recognizes them. So for us, that's a good thing.
Yeah. So basically, then, what is the difference between the FSSP and the SSPX?
Well, so the FSSP, they were part of the SSPX at one point. They were very much in line with Archbishop Lefebvre on many things that he believed or held, positions he held. But then they said, okay, this is too far now. What he's doing is not only illegal against canon law, but they saw that Lefebvre wasn't acting in good faith. He basically was like, it was like a double deal if you think about it, because he tells Rome, okay, I'm going to accept your terms, and we're going to come back into union with Rome, right? And then all of a sudden he makes a quick decision to back out of the whole thing and renege on the deal. And I think there's people out there that are going to say, well, Rome was never going to give him more than one bishop. They were only going to give him one traditional bishop, and that's all we were going to have, right? And that the traditional faith would have just been stale, like it would have never grown. So they try to make all these excuses, but what it comes down to at the end of the day is, like he did with Pope Paul the Sixth, Archbishop Lefebvre rejected John Paul II's authority. That's what it comes down to, as the Holy Father and the Supreme Pontiff, right? So it's sad because he was given so many chances to come back into union with Rome, and they really went out of their way to try to give him everything he was asking for, and they did give him what he asked for, and then he reneged on the deal. So the FSSP is really what would have been the SSPX had they accepted the deal, and it would have obviously been a much bigger group than it is now. But it's just a shame that Lefebvre didn't repent. He didn't go to the Holy Father before his death and say, hey, I'm sorry for consecrating all those bishops. Please forgive me, because he could have been forgiven. And we know this because Archbishop Thuk, who was a Sedevacantist archbishop who went rogue, there's a whole story about that. We won't get into that tonight. But Archbishop Thuk, he actually ended up coming back into union with Rome. He sent a letter before his death to John Paul II in 1984. It was December of 1984, not too long before I was actually born. And Pope John Paul II showed him mercy. He brought him back into the church. He died in a part of the Catholic Church. So it was a beautiful way for, Archbishop to come back that was schismatic. And Lefebvre could have done the same thing, but he didn't do it. So
the SSPX came first, and then because they wouldn't align with Rome, then the FSSP was formed.
It was formed because those priests said, we want to be in union with Rome. We want to take the deal that was offered to Lefebvre, and we want to be a part of the Catholic Church and accept the Novus Ordo masses, a valid liturgy, and accept the changes that were implemented by having the Novus Ordo. So they basically submitted to the authority of the churches, which is what St. Pius X and Pope Leo XIII told us that we need to do as Catholics. So they actually did the right thing. Whereas Lefebvre, I think a part of him just didn't want to give up that, I call it mini Pope. Like he was like a mini Pope in his own little way of the SSPX. He ran the whole show there, right? I don't think he wanted to give that up fully to Rome and let them take full control of it. So it was a sad way for everything to end for him, because once he was excommunicated, he wasn't even a bishop anymore. So that's why I call him Marcel Lefebvre. I don't call him Archbishop Lefebvre, because he wasn't even a bishop at that point. So it's just a sad way that it all ended. But the FSSP was very good to have around because they have a lot of parishes in the United States, which is good for a lot of Catholics have access to the sacraments or the traditional mass if that if they want that. And we have the ICK also. The ICK has grown over the years, so we're lucky. But what's happening now is with Pope Leo and Pope Francis is, people are saying, well, Pope Francis is going to get rid of the Latin Mass. We heard that for so many years,
Yeah.
right? And it's still here, right? It's still here.
Right.
It was never abrogated. Even Paul VI never fully got rid of it. Padre Pio had indol. He had permission to still say the Latin Mass before he passed. So I always have to laugh that, these people, they use these scare tactics to get people to watch their YouTube channels, right? Saying, oh, the Latin Mass is going to be banned. It's not going to get banned, Christine. They're not going to get rid
Right.
of it entirely. So it just makes me laugh.
Yeah, it's just clickbait. Is what
Exactly.
it is.
Exactly. So we're very fortunate to have the FSSP around because, there are a lot of good priests, and I've listened to some of their sermons that are out there. I know that Father Philip Wolf, a lot of people listened to him over the years. So there's some priests that are more prominent, I guess, within the FSSP that have been on YouTube and whatnot, or their sermons are out there. So I'm fully supportive of the FSSP and their mission and the ICK, and I'm happy that they're around.
Well, all the criticism of Pope Leo, in my opinion, it's worse than Pope Francis because it started right in the beginning, like the moment he was elevated. His that it was announced that he was the Pope. That's when the bashing started. But the title of this is, what does this signal for the traditional Mass? Well, obviously it's good news, right?
Yeah, no, it's good news, and I think that he'll follow suit of Pope Francis. I don't think he'll do anything to interfere with the FSSP or their mission. They're in union with Rome, unlike the SSPX. So, canonically, they're in good standing, and I don't see him changing any of that.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think the fact that, I don't know how you get a meeting with Pope Leo. I would assume he turns down a lot of meetings because
I mean, I assume Cardinal Parolин's involved a lot with who gets to meet the Pope. So the FSSP, they have a good relationship with Rome. So I'm not surprised that they were allowed to go meet him. They were with Pope Francis not too long ago, a few years ago, right?
Yeah, in
So
2024.
yeah, so I mean, even 2022. So that shows us that Rome's very much willing to receive them and listen to them, just like they are with these, with the ICK. So there's no issues there, and they'll even meet with the SSPX. I mean, Pope Benedict had met with the SSPX during his papacy, and tried to bring them back in the union, and they didn't want to do it. So it just shows you that we could have different popes that try to reach out to the SSPX and try to bring them back in communion. They're just not ready to accept Vatican II and the changes that happened afterwards. So.
I have had people make comments when we've talked about traditional masses and things, that told me, and I didn't comment back then, but they were saying that the SSPX is in full communion with the Pope and recognizes his authority. And I'm like, since when did this happen?
That's not true at all. And anyone who knows the history of this knows that that's not the truth. Canonically, they have no status in the Catholic Church. Pope Benedict has said it. Pope Francis reaffirmed it. I mean, this goes back to John Paul II, really, or actually, no, Paul VI, because he's the one who suppressed the society. Not too long after Archbishop Lefebvre made it pretty clear that he wasn't going to submit to Rome. So it was really, canonically, they were suppressed a long time ago, back in the 70s. So it's not true. It's just simply not true. They're not. Now, materially, you could say, yeah, they're Catholic, right? They're Catholics materially. But canonically, no, they're not. They're not tied to the Catholic Church. So Pope Francis extended an olive branch and gave them some limited faculties. Now we know that, well, possibly now with his death, we don't know if that stands anymore. We don't know if their priests are even allowed to hear confessions anymore. They might have lost that the ability to, or I'm sorry, they might have lost that, I guess that
Sacrament.
limited faculty that
Mm-hmm.
was granted to them by the Pope, right, by the Holy Father, because jurisdiction ultimately comes from the Pope. So
Was
I
there a time limit put on that? A timeline put
I
on that?
I don't know. I don't recall that, but I remember when John Salzo was on with you, he briefly mentioned this.
Yeah.
There are certain canon lawyers out there who are kind of debating this, whether they lost those faculties, right? So it'll be really interesting to see if Pope Leo comes along and says, you know what, we're going to still extend the olive branch, and the priests can hear confessions, and they can witness marriages as long as the local bishop approves and things like that. But they're still limited. Like they really shouldn't even be doing public masses, because if you go to the SSPX as a Catholic, as far as I understand this, and I'm not I'm saying I'm right about this, but the way I understand this, because they have no canonical status and they're not given permission by the local bishop to even say these masses, I don't think going on a Sunday to the SSPX is going to fulfill your obligation. I just don't see how that's possible, because the local bishop didn't grant them those faculties to say public masses. So it gets described as they're irregular, or it's kind of a weird situation. The whole thing with them is kind of weird in some ways.
Well, Dan, that brought up a point that I'd like to ask you about.
Yeah,
I'd love to bring on a priest to talk about this. At the Eucharistic Congress that was held in Indianapolis, all
yeah,
right?
yes,
And Vicky Yamasaki, John Henry Weston, Father James Altman held on the very same day an alternate Eucharistic Congress and misled Catholics to believe this was a part of the entire Eucharistic Revival Congress, and it was not.
yeah,
Now, Father Altman, and I found out because I asked Archbishop Thompson, who's the Archbishop of the Indianapolis Diocese, did they get permission to do this revival or do this Congress on the same day? And did they get permission? Did Father Altman get permission to say a Latin Mass? And I was told no. They didn't even ask permission. He was aware of it, but they asked no permission, and they went ahead and did it on their own. Was that a valid Mass?
I mean, you could
Because
technically.
Father Altman is not in our diocese. He's a visiting priest. He did not ask permission. Is that a valid Mass?
It would be a sacrilege, because the reason why it's a sacrilege is he would have said the words of consecration correctly. That's why it's a sacrilege, but he didn't have permission to do that. So yeah, it was not I mean, in terms of validity, you could technically argue it was valid, but that's what makes it a sacrilege, right?
Right.
So yeah, the whole thing was unfortunate, and it was a fake revival event. You and I, obviously, we know that, but it just shows you that there are people out there that believe that these people, well, actually, people like Father Allman, they really believe they're still part of the Catholic Church, and that they have full permission to just do whatever they want and to defy authority, and that's it, right? They don't need to get permission from anybody. So it just shows you that the mindset is everything is in the well, this is a big problem in the SSPX too. They think that everything's based on necessity, right? Saving the traditional mass, saving we're trying to undo Vatican II, basically, trying to go back to pre-Vatican II. It just goes on and on, Christine. You and I could have like a 2-hour conversation about this, really, but it I
Well, let
remember
me
that.
ask you this,
Yeah,
Dan. Let me
yeah.
ask you this. Can you really say you're Catholic if you don't, if you're not obedient to church authority? Can you really say you're Catholic?
Well, I mean, materially, you're still Catholic, right? You could be a schismatic, but still, because we're baptized in the church, you're still materially Catholic. But if you're a formal schismatic, I mean, that's obviously a big problem, and you're cutting yourself off from the sacraments and other things. So, it's tougher with the well, it's more complicated with the SSPXs because you have some priests out there, and I know that uh, there are some priests that'll debate this. They'll say, yeah, it's okay to go to the SSPX once in a while, and that might be okay, once in a while to go visit, but I wouldn't tell somebody to go there on a Sunday to fulfill their obligation. But that's just my own opinion. Uh, but there are going to be people out there going to say it's fine to go there every week. I mean, there are people that go to the ICK here that hop over the SSPX one week and they go between the two, right? But that's why the SSPX put their chapels close to the diocesan Latin mass
Ah,
groups, because they're trying to get those people to go to their mass too, right? And the whole traditionalist radical traditionalist propaganda that they promote starts to get poisoned within these FSSP communities. I saw a comment in the chat earlier as we were talking here, where someone said that they kind of had a bad experience going to the FSSP, and it kind of made them feel depressed. I get where they're coming from, because there are some people at the FSSP that'll go there and they'll say, well, Pope Francis wasn't a true pope. He was a heretic.
mhm,
That whole schismatic
mhm.
mentality starts to pour into some of these communities, and it's unfortunate. It's a shame, because really what Rome is trying to do is they want to have everyone be one. They wanted unity, and that was
Yes.
the whole point of having the FSSP around in the ICK, to keep Catholics from going into schism with the SSPX, right? So it's interesting.
So, Dan, what do you think overall of Pope Leo?
Oh, I like Pope Leo. I think he's really trying his best to hear everyone out, all sides.
Hmm.
Maybe he'll even have a meeting with the SSPX Superior General at some point. We don't know, right? So it'll be interesting to see if he does, and what he says about them and their status. I have a feeling he'll just reaffirm what Pope Francis and Pope Benedict said, that they have no canonical status. But we'll see, right? We haven't gotten there yet. But I think Pope Leo is doing his best to try to promote unity, and stay in line with what the church has taught since Vatican II, and the changes that the church felt was necessary to make. He's not going to get rid of the Novus Ordo Mass anytime soon. I can tell you that. There's
Yeah,
no there's this fantasy in these traditionalist communities, because I was a part of the SSPX at one time. I was with the Sedevacantists. They really believe that at some point a pope's going to come along and just abrogate the Novus Ordo, and we're just going to have the Latin Mass as the only liturgy out there, right? It's a fantasy, Christine. It's never going to happen.
well, there's also, for the audience, on X, there's this whole thing going on X about, of course, John Henry Weston is promoting this, that I sincerely believe that if it wasn't for V2, churches today would be empty. I agree with that. And I saw his comment earlier. He's sitting in Costco's parking lot.
Well, thank you for watching us at Costco.
Exactly. He's always telling me what parking lot he's at. It's so cute. But anyhow, all of this one subject is going all over X. And by the way, we are live on X tonight, everyone. We're on YouTube and X tonight. And that is Bishop Athanasius Snyder has come out and said that women have no place near the sanctuary.
Well, that's a problem, because Pope Francis obviously changed canon law so that you could have altar girls, right?
That's
So
right. But here's the problem that none of them ever talk about. Okay. In my area, we have altar men because they can't get the kids to volunteer to be altar boys or even altar girls. I would rather see, and they never talk about these altar girls who have gone on
yeah,
and pursued becoming a nun
Yeah.
because of the vocation of being an altar
Yeah.
girl, and
Yeah.
they'll say over and over again, the altar boy, the main thing is for them to become priests. Okay, we get that. But what about the altar girl? They
Well,
go on to become nuns.
it's ironic too that you mentioned that, because I told you earlier I was having a conversation with that guy at breakfast that I met today.
Yes,
We were
yes.
talking about this. We were talking about this exact subject, and um, it's just so funny that you mentioned that. But you're right. No, you're right. There are going to be some altar girls that are going to be inspired to go on and become nuns. Now there are going to be others that don't ever become nuns. But that's a choice that our Lord gives us, right? They
Mm-hmm.
have that choice to take the vocation of marriage and to maybe be a mother one day, right? So, um, what I think it comes down to is it's just some people just don't want to accept that the popes made these changes over the years. I mean, this started with Paul VI back in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
John Paul II back in 1994, if I recall correctly, and I'm trying to do the best I can here from memory, but he actually had I think if I remember right, a commission that looked into this, looked into altar girls, and they came back to him and said to the Holy Father, we have women that are already doing readings at the Mass. They're helping out in other ways. This is not they're not getting ordained, so why not let them be altar girls, right?
Yeah.
So that was really the conclusion. I don't remember the exact name of this group that he had looked into this, but I'll have to look it up later. But this has already been settled. So what's funny is the traditional groups, they just don't want to accept what the Pope has already told us that we can do, right? It comes down to rejecting authority again from the church and the
Mm-hmm.
magisterium. So we as good Catholics were to submit to the Holy Father and his magisterium as long as he's not, asking us to do something mortally sinful, right?
Correct.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, this is all settled matter, but they use this. The traditionalists use this because it's red meat for their base, for the radicals, and to get people fired up about altar girls. But altar girls have no impact on the validity of a mass. They have no impact on that. So to me, it's just silly, Christine. The whole thing's silly.
Well, the practical part of it is that um, it, these parishes are having a hard time getting the kids to participate as
Yeah,
altar boys or
yeah,
altar girls. And so, in many of the masses I've been to, Dan, there's altar men because
yeah.
there are no kids to be up there.
Yeah,
So,
there are adult males. I mean, even at Latin masses, when I was with the state of Acontis, they had an adult male that was helping serve the mass. So
yeah. So if they start down this road of only boys can serve, well, you are really eliminating a lot of choices now because they're having a hard time getting these children to volunteer. And not every Catholic parish has a Catholic school.
yeah, yeah, and the other problem is there's a shortage of priests out there right now, and
Yeah.
these guys they need they need as much help as they can get. I've met I know some priests personally. They'll go and do what 2 or 3 funerals, and then they got to go do mass. Then a few hours later, and then they have to do it by themselves the whole mass. So these guys get tired, right?
I on X, and I can't remember exactly what the subject was, but some Catholic was just going off about only priests should do this, only priests should do that, only priests should do this. And I said, "Do you realize what a day is like for a priest?" You
Well, a
know,
lot of people think it's just Saturdays and Sundays, but they have no idea how busy these guys can be, right?
yes, yes, they're going to hospitals, they're going to nursing homes, they're going and meeting with parishioners that need special prayers or
Mhm.
or whatever. I mean, their day is packed from the time they get up until they go to bed at night. And yet we're putting more undue burdens on the priest because only priests can do these certain things. It doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, no, some of them they have a lot going on, and unfortunately, there are no other priests to send because I've asked a priest of the local Novus Order here. I'm like, do you guys have like anybody from like Africa or some other country that can come over? And they're like, no, we've already brought a lot of these guys over, and helping in other parishes already. So it's unfortunate. I mean, we have to pray for more priests and more nuns out there as time goes on. Hopefully that'll change in the future. But right now, these guys need as much help as they can get. And if altar girls are all they have to offer help, I mean, the Holy Father has already made changes to the canon law so that they're allowed to do it.
Yeah.
So it's silly. The whole thing's silly.
It is silly. It is. All right, everyone. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get to who our guest is going to be on Thursday. I'm excited to talk to you about this. And thanks to Dan. Dan arranged this. Dan also arranged for me to meet Mike Lewis and bring Mike Lewis on. Dan's the man. I'm just saying.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you guys in the chat, by the way. I saw some of the comments you made. Thank you for your kind words.
And after we are back from the break, I'll tell you about Thursday's show, and then we'll take your comments and questions. So, Dan, thank you so much for jumping in here. You are a wealth of knowledge, as always, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
We'll be right back, everyone. All righty, we are back. Now, Thursday's show will be live too, and we will have on Karen Japson. Karen Japson, she is the founder of John Leap's Evangelization. John Leap's Evangelization. And I'll have all of her contact information for you on Thursday. I had almost a 2-hour conversation with her last night, and she is coming on to talk about a miracle that happened in her family, her own spiritual experiences. And this is a fascinating discussion that you don't want to miss. Her story about this miracle that occurred in her family didn't just happen one time. This healing took place and happened to other people as well. So you've got to hear this. It's unbelievable. So, Dan, let's take the comments and see what everybody has to say about tonight's show or what questions you have. What's the first comment? Hi there. Kennedy Hall's greatest lie. SSPX is in full communion with Rome. Yes, I have had commenters say that to me too, and I knew it wasn't true. Thank you. Rosemarie Curry, who is on the members only. Thank you, Rosemarie, for being a part of that. Pope Leo celebrates the TLM Mass, so perhaps he will allow more of these masses. Yeah, he hasn't suppressed them at all. And a lot of this comes down to the local bishops' decision on these things. So I have always said, I would love it if everyone had the choice between a TLM and a Novus Ordo. What I don't agree with is that it can only be the traditional Latin Mass. I think we should have choices. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Nicole. I hope you're resting. The TLM church where I live is FSSP. Okay, we all coexist beautifully. Yeah, here too, Nicole. Yeah, we don't have any problems with the FSSP in Greenwood. I've been to that chapel. Yeah. Hey, Kayla, good to see you. I love Pope Leo. I do too, Kayla. I do too. I just love him. Anything else, Dan? Christian praying. Hey, Christian praying. 60% of Catholics in the world speak Spanish. Is that right? I never knew that. I can barely speak English, so that's good to know. Kayla, priests are so busy. Yes, they are. They really are. And I wish Catholics would give them a break and not demand so much from them. They are busy. Salmi, I stopped listening to Kennedy Hall when he said the Novus Ordo was a danger to your and you should stay home if you can't find a TLM. Then he wrote a defense of Lefebvre. Why do I have such a problem with that man's? Lovers lady, thank you. The problem with the Novus Ordo is that it is valid. Father Chad Ripperger. Thank you for the tip, lovers lady. Rosemarie, Pope Leo seems to want to unify, so will be interesting if he meets with the SSPX. Yes, he does want to unify. He wants to unify us all. And I'm right there with him. Christian praying, only 9% of worldwide Catholics speak English. Pope Leo is beloved by the Spanish global South. Wow, 9% of the worldwide Catholics speak English. Didn't know that. Salmi, they launched a new app called Pelican. It's loaded with articles from schismatics. I'll be darned, I didn't know about that. Thanks, Salmi. Eileen, hi, Eileen. I used to listen to Kennedy Hall for a short while, but he is leading many away from the Catholic Church. Yeah, I watched a few of his videos, but I was never a subscriber, never a long-term listener of Kennedy Hall. Girls were not meant to be altar servers, sorry. Now all we hear about is female deacons and priests. This dude talking has no idea what he's talking about. Dan doesn't know what he's talking about. I think Dan knows exactly what he's talking about. And hey, we can agree to disagree. Rosemary, altar girls are there because not as many boys are volunteering. That's exactly right, Rosemary. They're not volunteering. And, what are you going to do? When you don't have men volunteering, you don't have altar boys volunteering, what are you going to do? The priest can't be up at that altar doing everything. Nicole. Hey, Nicole. I hope that Pope Leo is probably going to Mexico this year and will dedicate his papacy to Our Lady of Guadalupe. It was a reputable source, but I can't remember which one. So you read that he is going to Mexico and dedicating his papacy to Our Lady of Guadalupe. That would be fabulous. That would be fabulous. I wish I could be on like one of the reporters that gets to go on the plane with the Pope. I would love that job. All righty. Anything else, Dan? All righty. Doesn't look that way. Okay, everyone, come back Thursday. Come back Thursday. You are going to find Karen fascinating. Her story is fascinating. She has a really nice apostolate. And what she does is John Leap's evangelization. She does, she organizes events for Catholics to come to. She's a great organizer. So I'll give you all of her information Thursday night. You'll meet her and you'll hear the miracle that occurred in her family. It's a great story, you all, so don't miss it. And remember, eternal life is forever. Got a plan? Oh, thanks, Salmi. I appreciate you. I hope you have a plan, and I hope your plan is Jesus. Bye-bye.